if the other players don't believe in the guy who's starting at quarterback, they're not going to perform for him at the same level they might for someone else. So there is definitely something to having a rapport between a quarterback, his receivers, the running backs, the offensive line. The whole thing's got to work together.
Hey, welcome back to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and A-Day is getting closer in Tuscaloosa. We had our friend Nick Kelly on earlier this week to break down some positional storylines heading into the spring game, or whatever it is now. We'll find out on Saturday. But today, we want to focus on Kalen DeBoer, Alabama's head coach in year 2. His first A-Day drew a huge turnout, a lot of excitement around the post-Nick Saban era, the next chapter for Alabama football, even if there was some uncertainty. But after a 9-4 season, we're going to see what it looks like on Saturday, just months before the second season kicks off. And we obviously still have a lot of questions about DeBoer and his sophomore effort. So we invited our friend and columnist, Kevin Scarbinsky, back. You can read his excellent work on AL.com. Kevin, thanks for doing this.
Glad to do it, Ben. I got to warn you, though, I'm still a little sad that basketball season has ended, and we fell short, not that far short, but we fell short of my dream IBOB national championship game between Alabama and Auburn. But, hey, there's always next year, right?
The fact that was even on the table is just kind of unbelievable and surreal. You know, my first comment here, Kevin, was going to be, I know that your beloved basketball season has just ended, and we're already turning the page. So let me be the first to apologize for being just another predictable Alabama football dork.
Well, look, it's not like football has ceased to be important. It's just that basketball has become more important to more people in this state than ever before. And I think that's going to continue for a long time. And really, Nate Oates has set a pretty high bar for Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. I forget what Nick Saban did. Well, no one will ever forget what Nick Saban did, obviously. But now football is not the most successful sport on campus. And it's up to Kalen DeBoer to get it back to that level.
Yeah, success and importance are two different things in Tuscaloosa, right? Like, you know, we obviously still have burning questions about Kalen DeBoer heading into year 2, like I said. But, you know, before we get to my questions here, Kevin, I'm curious about what's rolling around in your head about Alabama football right now. Let's put the ball in your court for a second. If you're at a presser, right, or you get direct access to Kalen DeBoer and they give you one question to ask him, whether it's about the season, about the team, about, you know, Tuscaloosa being the guy, just year 2, what would you ask Kalen DeBoer? What's your burning question?
Well, obviously I'd ask him something that would, you know, make him think and give a thoughtful, expanded answer beyond yes or no, which he usually doesn't do. He usually does give you some thoughts. They might be more coach speak thoughts. I'd like him to be a little more honest and speak from the heart, I think, than he does. I think he's kind of guarded in that sense. But my question would be, why should we believe that year 2 will be not only different from year 1, but better in terms of the bottom line and the results on the field?
That's a great question. I mean, I'd be interested to hear what he has to say about it. You know, we joke a lot about, like you said, the coach speak that we often hear from Kalen DeBoer, but I do think he's a thoughtful guy, and I think that he, you know, you've got to put a lot of thought into a decision to replace Nick Saban and try to be the guy after the guy. So there's a lot of pressure on him, but it seems like he embraced it and he knew what he was getting into. But, you know, one of the reasons I'm sure that he would say, maybe not on the record, that things are going to look different in 2025 compared to his first season, which was moderately successful, but certainly by not reaching the first 12-team playoff, people view it as a failure, largely. Some people do, right? But one reason I think that he would say it's going to be different is because he's going to have a quarterback that might fit his system a little better. And that's with all due respect to Jalen Milroe, who we're fans of and we love to watch, and we wish him all the success in the world. But, you know, I thought it was interesting. Longtime ESPN reporter Chris Lowe recently visited Tuscaloosa this week. He shared his assessment of the Bama quarterback race, right? And it's not dissimilar to what we heard from our friend Nick Kelly earlier this week, but some interesting tidbits. He wrote, quote, Ty Simpson is best positioned to be the starter, but he has to go win it. Hasn't done it yet. Austin Mack is battling and has some real support among players. Keelan Russell is the most talented of the three, but a freshman. It's a legit race, end quote, according to Chris Lowe. Kevin, do you think Alabama has a quarterback on the roster who can help them reach the playoff this year?
Well, the obvious answer is they better, because if they don't, this is their room. This is their rotation. This is their group that they have got to choose from. So they obviously believe that. And we have to believe, given their track record and the re-addition of Ryan Grubb to the staff. Kalen DeBoer has been at his best as a head coach when he's had Ryan Grubb alongside on the offensive side of the ball. So that's a reason to be optimistic that they will be more effective on that side of the ball and that they will get more out of the quarterback position than they got out of Jalen Milroe. And look, Jalen did some great things, but he didn't take the leap forward that a lot of people thought he might, because Kalen DeBoer's had so much success with quarterbacks. Not necessarily that style of quarterback, though. So I think from that standpoint, the three guys that are competing for the job, they are more of the type of quarterback that Kalen DeBoer has had success with, feels comfortable with, and that with Ryan Grubb and Nick Sheridan working alongside him, that they have the best chance to take that leap forward. The one thing that is curious, that quote that you cited from Chris Lowe, that was it Austin Mack, that he said has support among the players. And I can imagine some Alabama fans cringing at that a little bit, because we heard that about Jalen Milroe. You can't replace Jalen Milroe because there'll be a mutiny in the locker room, because the players love him. His teammates love him. He's a great teammate. He's a great guy. He has earned their respect. And we always heard Nick Saban say, the quarterback doesn't win the job, he wins the team. It's the guy who wins the team that takes the position. And obviously there's some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. But if it becomes a popularity contest, then you are heading down the wrong road. And I'm not suggesting that that's what Kalen DeBoer would do in making that decision, but certainly something to look out for. Look, if the other players don't believe in the guy who's starting at quarterback, they're not going to perform for him at the same level they might for someone else. So there is definitely something to having a rapport between a quarterback, his receivers, the running backs, the offensive line. The whole thing's got to work together. So it is going to be fascinating to watch this competition unfold, because obviously it's going to continue into fall camp.
I 100% agree with you that out of everything Chris Lowe said there, and there was a lot of substance, that line about he has support among the team is pretty critical, right? Because of the reason that you mentioned, that appears to be the reason that Jalen Milroe never got pulled during the 24 season. And maybe he was the quarterback that gave them the best chance to win. But there were rumblings, right, that he had the full support of the roster pretty much. And if you pulled him from the starting position, it could cause tension, a rift among the team. So, but we'll never know now until somebody tells us. But
Right.
how critical is this decision for Kalen DeBoer specifically? Because, quarterbacks, it's important for every team, but, given what he wants to accomplish on offense, it seems like the entire season and potentially his job is riding on the choice that he ultimately makes. And, he inherited a great player, a talented player in Jalen Milroe, but maybe he wasn't the right fit for what DeBoer wanted to do. So this choice will ultimately reflect on him and what he wants to do big picture as the next guy at Alabama. So pretty important, right?
It's ultimately important, because if you look at the game, to me, that defined last season, Kalen DeBoer's first at Alabama, it was the Oklahoma game. Because at kickoff of that game, everything they wanted to accomplish, just about everything, was still in play. They were in the playoff, if you want to put it that way. They were in great position to make the playoff, not go to the SEC championship game, but still make the playoff. And as we have seen, Alabama does not have to win the SEC to win a national championship. They've done it twice, or they did it twice under Nick Saban. So the way that game unfolded, the fact that you're playing a mediocre Oklahoma team and you scored 3 points, that still boggles my mind that game unfolded the way it did. Because earlier in the season, they lost to Vanderbilt, but they scored a bunch of points. What was it, 40-35? The final score, something along those lines. And the defense let Vanderbilt keep the ball far too long, was a big issue there. Turnovers were an issue on offense. But the defense got better throughout the year. The Alabama defense that finished the season was better than the Alabama defense that started the season, that let Georgia come back and almost steal that game in Tuscaloosa at the end of September. So the defense did improve. The offense did not. And that's the concern, that despite the issues, they never did go to Ty Simpson. They never did give Jalen Milroe a chance to watch even a series from the side. Just let him take a rest. Let him gather his thoughts. Put someone else in just for, even if it's for a series. And he never felt comfortable doing that. So I'm going to be really curious. Can Ty Simpson, and this is really the goal, I think, for Ty Simpson to be Mac Jones 2.0. The guy that was there and he did his time and he waited his turn and he put in the work. And when his time came, he seized the moment. Now, Mac Jones was surrounded by an all-time great list of playmakers. Is this group going to perform at that level and help Ty Simpson have that kind of season if he does indeed win the job? As again, he seems the most likely choice at this point. We don't know. These are some of the unanswered questions. And for the second straight year, and we talked about this last year before the season, there is great uncertainty about Alabama football to a degree that Alabama football has not experienced in a long, long time.
100%. And we've talked about the Ty Simpson, Mac Jones parallels before. And obviously, Ty Simpson was under the impression that he would be playing for Nick Saban throughout the course of his career in Tuscaloosa. Not the case. That being said, a lot of talent still on this Alabama roster. He's going to have a lot of guys to throw to, a lot of good targets, especially a guy like Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, very reliable, explosive players. So that's not in question at this point. The quarterback is the question, right? And so he has, I think, even expressed that he's willing to take the Mac Jones path. Well, here you are. You have the opportunity, right? Like, now's the time for you to finally get the job. You've bided your time, and you're going to get the chance to be the guy. So we'll see if, according to Chris Lowe, he has to win the job. We'll see if he goes out and wins the job. But he's the presumptive favorite, to say the least. I wonder, we've had that whole conversation about, is it unfair? Do we have unfair expectations in Tuscaloosa? Do we have unfair expectations for the head coach, especially in their first year? Like 9-4 at most programs in their first season is a success by most people's standards. At Alabama, it's obviously different, considering the context of what you just said, that late into the season, everything's on the table. It's right in front of them. They blow it at Oklahoma. They don't make the playoff. So the expectations are going to continue to be high. And if Kalen DeBoer doesn't win, again, the walls will start to close in Tuscaloosa in year two. But Kevin, do you consider this 2025, do you consider it a make or break year for Kalen DeBoer?
I don't know if I would put that label on it, go to that extreme. On the flip side, year two has been the defining season for great coaches, certainly at Alabama and in the SEC, and nationally as well. So if they don't take that leap forward, I mean, we can go back to Gene Stallings, 7-5 his first year, 11-1 the second year, with the only loss in the swamp to Florida and Steve Spurrier. Go back to Nick Saban, mediocre his first year, 7-6. The next year they run the table in the regular season. They're number one in the country. They're playing Florida in the SEC championship game to play for a national championship. And they were so close. They were leading in the fourth quarter, and then Tim Tebow turned into Tim Tebow. So look at Kirby Smart. Mediocre his first year at Georgia. Second year, they win the SEC. They play for the national championship. They're in overtime in the national championship, and then 2nd and 26 happened. But they made a great leap forward in Kirby Smart's second year. Even guys who haven't achieved greatness yet as coaches, Josh Heupel took a great leap forward. Tennessee was much improved his second year. So we've seen it time and time and time again. And we saw it from these guys before the portal existed, where you could go out and find specific pieces to supplement your roster. Those guys were able to install their culture, their foundation in year one, take their lumps, suffer some bruises, and then year two, you saw what they were all about and you saw what they were capable of. That's why I think this year is critical for Kalen DeBoer. I wouldn't call it a make or break year because that would suggest if you don't make the playoff, you're not going to be back for year three. I don't think that Greg Byrne would have that kind of an itchy trigger finger unless everything goes wrong and they go 6-6 and you're going backward at a dizzying pace. Then, of course, all bets are off. But from the sense that we are going to get a sense of whether Kalen DeBoer is the long-term answer for Alabama. Is he going to have them in contention for SEC and national championships on a regular basis? If that's going to be the case, I think you're going to have to see that leap forward this year. And that means winning. They won 9 last year, but it means winning 10 or 11. It means making the playoff at minimum. I think that's the minimum requirement for this year is to make the playoff.
Well, I mean, you mentioned second-year leaps, right? I mean, Gene Chizik won the national championship in his second year, right? So Alabama fans just need Kalen DeBoer to be Gene Chizik. It helps, when
oh my gosh, Pete, you're going to have people driving off the road if they're listening to this in their car, Ben. Holy cow!
No, but I mean, look, they had the sort of like the portal before the portal in that they were able to recruit a generational player to come play for them for that one season with arguably the greatest season in the history of the position and in college football. So it's a little different. Look, I mean, Kevin, it's possible, too, that we're all speaking too soon, right? That Kalen DeBoer's tenure has to play out a little bit, and we have to give him the grace of a year or two in developing a program in his image, so to speak, because all we heard about Kalen DeBoer was he's the guy because he's won everywhere he's been, and he's going to win at Alabama, too. So if Kalen DeBoer wins, everybody's going to shut up about Kalen DeBoer. And that cures all. We've seen it a million times at a million different programs. So the same is true in Tuscaloosa. But obviously, if you don't, it's a different story, especially in a place like Tuscaloosa where the standard is so high. But, based on what you were saying, too, about like taking that leap in year two, these guys coming in, having mediocre seasons, the context of what they inherited is obviously key there because you're talking about Nick Saban coming in and inheriting a program that was not in a great place for Mike Shula. You're talking about, Kirby Smart coming into Georgia and following up Mike Richt, who couldn't really make the leap as the head coach, at least from a national championship perspective. And Kalen DeBoer comes in and inherits what Nick Saban built. And they're an overtime loss away from playing for a national championship, potentially playing Kalen DeBoer for a national championship. So it's interesting. And, that being said, even when you inherit a great program, that doesn't mean that it's going to go to plan or it's going to be the exact same thing that it was. But, I guess some people probably thought maybe Kalen DeBoer can have like a Larry Coker type run where he comes into Miami and like wins immediately with all the talent that he has. And it just wasn't the case. And it played out how we saw it play out. But, I'll posit you this one, Kevin. Between Kalen DeBoer and, let's say, Hugh Freeze, who still has his job, his current job, 5 years from now?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Hugh Freeze won't have his job 2 years from now if he doesn't take a step forward with Auburn this season, I would suggest. And while I think Kalen DeBoer has a longer leash, if you will, because it's just year two for him, he did inherit the greatest program over time that produced more over time than anyone in the history of the sport. So the patience will run out quickly. And that's the thing about year two is now you've got your people in place. He's got the band back together. He's got Ryan Grubb there. And everyone, isn't it interesting how closely Alabama fans monitor who the coordinators are, especially the offensive coordinator, because Nick Saban had so many of them and they all had different levels of success. But this guy, I think the expectations for Ryan Grubb may be higher than the expectations for Kalen DeBoer. And of course, they're tied together. But what I mean when I say that is people are going to expect them to light up the scoreboard the way they did in the first half against Georgia last year, for example. No matter how good the defense is, no matter how good the opponent is, that if they do their job offensively, based on what we saw from that group at Washington with Michael Penix, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to score a lot of points on a consistent basis. So if they get that done and the defense continues to make the improvement we saw last year, then there's no reason why they shouldn't be back in the playoff mix and contending for a national championship. So 5 years from now, gosh, that is so hard. It's impossible to predict. It's hard to predict what's going to happen 5 months from now, let alone 5 years from now. But I would suspect that we will have the answer at the end of this season. That I know
You're pushing on me, Kevin.
I'm weaseling out. I know I'm weaseling out of it. You try to box me into a corner, and I'm weaseling out a little bit. But I don't think we can answer that right now.
Yeah,
because if Auburn takes that leap forward this year and Alabama doesn't, then it's more likely to be Hugh Freeze, and vice versa. Look, Auburn's fan base has got to be they haven't been relevant in football for far too long, much longer than they had been irrelevant for a long time. So I know they're antsy on that side of the state. But Alabama's not going to be real patient either if they don't make the playoff. If you've got Texas making the playoff and you've got Georgia making the playoff and you've got Tennessee making the playoff as happened last year, and you only get 3 SEC teams in the playoff, who would have thought we would have had more SEC teams in basketball in the Elite Eight than football teams in the first 12-team playoff? You could have won a lot of money if you had been able to place a wager on that a couple of years ago. So, no, it's all bets are off. There's no way to know. I really couldn't answer that. It's total speculation, obviously. But get back to me. Don't even give me the whole season. Get back to me at the end of September, and we'll see where Auburn is versus where Alabama is, how they've started the season. They will have played some significant games by that point, some significant SEC games by that point, and then we'll have a better picture of whose long-term future looks more secure, Mr. DeBoer or Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, the difference that I would point out is that Iron Bowl wins aren't going to be enough in Alabama or at Alabama. Whereas in Auburn, they might be, right? When you've gone 5 straight years without beating Alabama. So they're probably getting antsy.
I saw one of those posts the other day on X. It's been this many days since Alabama has lost to Auburn in football. And that's all well and good. But like you said, that is not enough in Tuscaloosa.
No.
Because they're used to winning a lot more than state championships.
We'll get you out of here on this, Kevin. We just recently did a bracket where we let fans vote in polls, and they told us who they thought was the best Alabama player of all time, Alabama football player of all time. The fans spoke. I'll share with you the result if you haven't seen it, but I want to ask you, who do you consider the greatest football player in Alabama history? Curious what Kevin Scarbinsky thinks.
Well, and I think he was the winner of the poll, if I'm not mistaken, but you'll let me know. I always thought it was Derek Thomas. And it was always, it's easier to judge people that you saw in person. And I've been watching a lot of Alabama football players for a lot of years. And I don't think I've seen one player at any position dominate at that position and impact games from that position quite like Derek Thomas did. It's unfortunate the teams were not national championship type teams that he played on, but that was through no fault of his. He was so far above the competition, so far above the guys that tried to block him, and so far above other edge rushers that he's the guy. I've always said anytime this kind of discussion has come up, he's the first name that always pops to mind for me. It's Derek Thomas.
Hey, well, the fans agree with you, right? Score one against recency bias. You would think that a Saban player would have probably won it, and they came in second. It was Devontae Smith, but Derek Thomas's legacy is strong as ever, apparently, among Alabama fans. So good answer there, Kevin. I appreciate the perspective.
Wait a minute. Are you suggesting that I have something in common with Alabama fans, that we actually are of like mind.
I think you
on
both just
on a football issue. That's
I think y'all both just know ball. You know, Alabama fans know ball.
That's it.
Kevin Scarbinsky knows ball. So I
That's
think
what it
Derek
is.
Thomas is the correct answer. Y'all can agree on that, can't you?
Of course. Well, of
Okay.
course. We agree.
All right.
We agree on a lot, but that's I'm having a little fun there with the Alabama fan base, but as they like to have with me, and I certainly enjoy the back and forth.
Well, he is Kevin Scarbinsky. He writes an outstanding column for AL.com. You can find it there.
Thanks, Ben. This has been fun.
You can find Beat Everyone on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. I am Ben Flanagan with AL.com. We'll see you next time.